You ever be doing something ordinary, typing away on a deadline, headphones on, coffee cooling beside you, and then in one terrible second the person you love most turns into someone you don't recognize? That was me the night my wife walked into the room, eyes blazing, and with a single motion smashed my laptop to pieces while yelling, "Now you have to pay." It's a line that echoed, not just off the tile, but through everything that came after: our finances, our trust, our shared history. This is the story of how one violent minute collapsed months of small hurts, and how we both had to live with the cost, financial, emotional, and moral, after the shards settled. We met when we were younger and softer around the edges. There were late-night study sessions that turned into messy pizza runs, jokes passed back and forth like a private language, 100 little rituals that became ours. I thought we were building a life together, a bookshelf, a dog, plans for vacations that always got postponed but never lost their dreamlike sheen. I worked as a developer, remote, freelance, so my laptop was both my office and my studio. I took it everywhere, guarded it like something precious, because in a way it was. It carried contracts, code, proposals, and the ghosts of projects that meant opportunities to actually breathe easier. She worked in counseling, long hours with fragile people, and came home carrying stories I never fully understood. Somewhere along the way our rhythms drifted. Mine became meetings and deadlines, hers became patience running thin. We were there together, and yet somehow alone. There's always 100 tiny cracks before the big fracture. For months she left notes that felt more like little flares: "Call me when you can. Did you forget dinner? Are you okay?" I brushed most of them off because the client bills don't pause. Because a missed milestone means a capricious economy moves in and eats the next week's comfort. She used to joke that I loved the glow of my screen more than the glow of our life. I would laugh and push it away with a kiss. But jokes are sometimes maps pointing to truth, and I ignored the directions. The fight that night was not, in itself, extraordinary. It was the kind of fight other people have about small betrayals that happen slowly: missed date nights, the coldness that grows like mold in damp places when you stop airing things out. She wanted me to go to dinner with her friends. I told her I had a deadline, an app feature that needed one more pass, a bug that wouldn't quit. She asked for an hour. I asked for time. We both asked the wrong things. Anger turned fast, words became heavier, and then she walked out of the living room. She came back with my laptop in her hands. I remember the sound before I saw the damage, a sickening crack that took up space in the room. The screen spiderwebbed instantly, plastic buckled in ways I had never imagined. I didn't move. I think my brain disconnected like an old server, stunned by a command it couldn't parse. I stared at what had been my livelihood, and at the person who had broken it. She stood breathing hard, eyes wet, voice raw as she repeated, "Now you have to pay." It wasn't only an order, it was a verdict, and it landed like a gavel. At first I was stunned into disbelief. I went through motions I barely felt, picking up pieces, searching for files, booting a dead machine to see if somehow miracles could happen. There were backups, half-remembered safety nets, but not the recent work. Months of iterations were scrambled, some irretrievable. Clients called. I explained, fumbling for words that felt as inadequate as the plaster of the laptop's shattered casing. One contract walked away, another sent threats. My income dipped, the cushion we had slowly thinned, and suddenly the argument wasn't just an argument anymore. It had become currency we were immediate slaves to. When the immediate practical chaos settled into silence, the house felt like a set where actors were waiting for cues that never came. We didn't speak for days, and when we did it felt like learning a new language. She apologized in fits and starts, sobbing one minute, defensive the next. She told me she'd felt invisible for months, like a room lamp left on while everyone pretended there was daylight. She wanted me to feel what it's like to lose something important. I wanted to tell her that her being invisible wounded me too, that her actions had consequences beyond making a point. Instead, we circled the wreckage, both of us guilty, both of us wounded, neither of us sure which wound was deeper. The financial fallout was immediate and painful. Losing clients meant we tightened belts, canceled plans, and ate cheaper dinners. The new laptop we couldn't afford arrived slowly, piece by piece, through budgets, second-hand fixes, and favors. Legal questions hovered like a fog. Could I take action for destroying my property? Would police take a domestic dispute seriously? I remember the absurdity of Googling what to do when spouse destroys property in the middle of the night, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. In the end we never went down that path. Legal recourse felt like pouring salt on an already raw place, but the thought gnawed at me: when does a personal betrayal become a civil one? And how do you measure damage in a marriage where money and love have always been tangled? Blame is seductive. It's a tidy way of avoiding uncomfortable truth. For a while I put her at the center of the story in my head. She was the one who swung her arm, who destroyed, who screamed. That version of events let me feel righteous and very wronged. But reality is messy, eh? In quieter moments, when anger cooled and sleep came, I began to trace my own negligence: the late nights, the missed text, The patience with clients and impatience with the woman beside me. I had built a life where my laptop got prioritized because of a promise I told myself about providing stability. I forgot that providing lives beside being present. It's an easy error to make in work culture: value the visible output, the numbers, and forget the smaller economies of daily tenderness that fuel a relationship. We tried therapy. Neither of us wanted a battle reenacted in a stranger's office, but we wanted tools that might prevent the same explosion. Talking it out felt like peeling an onion: tears, stinging layers, and at the center something raw and honest. In therapy we were slow to admit what we both already knew: we had been retreating to different corners instead of meeting in the middle. Therapy forced us to name the patterns: avoidance, passive anger, holding grudges like talismans. It taught us small practical things: setting no-work evenings, sharing calendars, giving micro-updates about the day, but the larger lessons were about listening, how to really hear when someone says they feel unseen, and how to respond without trying to fix everything in one go. Rebuilding work was a humbling experience. I had to call past clients and be honest, sometimes ashamed. I learned better backup systems. I diversified where my work lived. The digital trauma left its imprint on me. Every blinking cursor would now remind me, in an embarrassed whisper, of what can vanish in a heartbeat. But rebuilding wasn't purely financial. I rebuilt routines too: dinners without screens, walks where we left our phones at home, and nights where we tried to talk about nothing and everything. Tiny rituals that don't cost much often work better than grand apologies. Forgiveness is a crooked path. It isn't a single moment but a series of smaller decisions to try again. I forgave her for smashing the laptop because love and anger are not the same, because her act, however destructive, was a cry. But forgiving didn't mean forgetting, nor did it mean allowing similar behavior unchallenged. There needed to be boundaries, consequences, and a plan so that snapping didn't become a recurring policy. For her part, she had to reckon with the fact that making a point by causing harm is still harm. She took responsibility in ways that mattered, apologizing beyond words, helping to stitch back what she could, and engaging in therapy that made her face the weight of impulse. People asked, why not leave? Why not press charges? Those were valid questions. The truth was more complicated than sound bites. Love isn't always dramatic departures or cathartic endings. Sometimes it's a messy middle. We stayed because we believed there was something worth saving, because there were memories and a history that neither of us wanted to throw away lightly. We also stayed because leaving isn't simple. It's full of logistics and legalities and fears. I recognize now that staying was my choice as much as hers, neither heroic nor necessarily wise in every sense, but honest. Months later, the broken laptop story became less like a single defining catastrophe and more like a cautionary tale we told one another in softer tones, a reminder of what happens when you stop paying attention. We kept rebuilding, not just devices and bank accounts, but the more fragile systems of daily care. We learned to talk about neglect without devolving into accusation. We built accountability, check-ins about workload, explicit acknowledgement of stress, a shared calendar where we penciled in time for each other the same way we penciled in deadlines. It was practical, sometimes awkward, but steady. There were hard nights, relapses where old grievances leapt up like shadows and threatened to swallow new progress. There were also small victories: a dinner where neither of us touched a screen, a spontaneous weekend trip paid for by a tiny savings plan we called our repair fund, an evening where laughter came back without bitterness. The laptop incident never left us entirely. It lived in our stories the way scars live on the skin, visible if you look closely, but not the whole person. When I think back to that moment she yelled, "Now you have to pay," I used to picture it only as an accusation about money. Over time, the meaning expanded. Payment wasn't merely monetary, it was emotional. It meant acknowledging neglect, owning mistakes, and paying the slow, everyday price of rebuilding trust. Neither of us walked away unscathed, and neither of us came out unmarked. The cost was real, but so was the work to address it. We traded the crash of a single destructive act for the slower, quieter grind of repair. If there's a lesson here, it's not tidy or moralistic. There's no single answer about whether we did the right thing staying together or if leaving would have been healthier. What I can say is this: when a life is bound up in small attentions, the absence of them is dangerous. If you find yourself prioritizing a device, a job, or a habit over a person who shares your bed, it's worth asking why. And if someone lashes out, it's worth remembering that the lash is often a map to their own hurt. Confront the action, yes, but don't lose sight of the need underneath. Fixing what's broken, whether it's a laptop, a contract, or a heart, takes more than money. It takes attention, time, and the willingness to change the habits that let the break happen in the first place. We still have rough days, we still stumble, but the sound of something smashing now makes us both flinch and then pause. It's a physical reminder that words and choices have consequences. And while the laptop is a thing, replaceable, insured, repaired, the lesson it forced on us is not: take care of what and who you love, Don't wait until something, or someone, has to break for you to finally see them.